I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Clearly, there are some panelists that are still coming. And is it already? Okay. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to Election Central. This is where everything happens on Election Day. So when you get emails or anything about with the updates, this is exactly where we are, making sure that all things are going wonderfully throughout the county so that we can deliver you results as quickly as possible. I want to especially thank the friends and colleagues who were kind enough to come here from Indianapolis today to be with us and present as panelists. The first person I want to thank is Dustin Renner, who works for the Secretary of State. Dustin and I have a legislative history where we would work together at his previous office to deliver best practices and common sense legislation to our Monroe County clerks, all of Indiana's clerks. And so when the Secretary of State stole him from his previous employer, I want to tell you, Dustin promised me I will not leave you. You will still, be able to keep in touch with me. And I'm so very fortunate because I know if I call and he missed my call, I know he will call me back. I also want to acknowledge Shatrice Mosley Romero, who works for CISA. And when I reached out to CISA and this is what I want to do, she called me back. And I want to tell you today she is moving her daughter into IU. So she really made a special effort to be here with us today, and I am so, so very grateful for that. We brought our friends in from our IU, and I am so honored to recognize Isaac Asare and Mr. Shackle, Dr. Shackelford. I'm so very grateful to you to come up here and offer best practices. And I want to thank each and every person who showed up because this is a work week. People have things to do, but this was important to have these discussions as we approach the general election. This event came together very quickly, and I tell you, I kind of came into work one morning and I pulled Kylie and my chief deputy into a room and said, hey, I think I want to do a roundtable on cybersecurity and elections, and they said, okay. And that is how it ended up with this, which I am just truly honored and flattered, and I thank you for that. I think this is proof that when great minds come together, great things can happen. So I asked, I wanted to have this roundtable because elections matter, and everybody in this room knows it. I feel like I'm talking to, people that I talk to all the time. We all know that elections matter, but they're under more scrutiny than ever. Presidential elections face scrutiny because we're on a national stage, and a presidential election that can change the course of history, such as the one that we find ourselves in, can face even more scrutiny because the whole world is looking at us. We are the leaders of the free world, and they are looking to see how we handle elections. So I reached out to my friends and asked them to show up to talk about best practices, a vision, and just making sure that, because all I can control out of the 92 counties is the elections that happen in this county. And I want to make sure that Monroe County is setting the gold standard for elections. And so I feel like I know all of you, and I'm so excited to see you, but I'd like to go around and have you introduce yourselves and what you do and what you hope to get from this roundtable discussion.
Starting with me?
Yes, sir.
Well, it's uphill from here, but I'm Isaac Asare. I am the executive director of IU's Cybersecurity Clinic. I'm also the co-director of our Cybersecurity and Global Policy Program, faculty member at the Hamilton Luger School.
Boom. Scott Shackelford. I work with Isaac in the Cybersecurity Clinic. I'm a professor at the business school, in the law school, and I direct two of our research centers at IU, the Center for Applied Cybersecurity Research and then the Ostrom Workshop, and I was the founding cybersecurity chair at IU. And we do have a new book on securing democracy in the digital age coming out later this year. Very global, so we're looking at jurisdictions all over the world for that one. But, yeah.
Hi, everybody. I'm Greg Crone, IT Director for Monroe County Government. I'm Shatrice Mosley Romero. I'm the cybersecurity cybersecurity advisor and state coordinator for the state of Indiana. I'm out of Indianapolis and very vested and was very happy to be here, especially with my kiddo living in Monroe County. So always happy to help support the local government. So.
Dustin Renner, the election director with the Secretary of State's office.
Kylie Moreland, Monroe County Election Supervisor.
Randy Cassidy, citizen and previous candidate for commissioner.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ami Gandhi. I lead the Midwest Voting Rights Program at a nonpartisan organization called Chicago Lawyers Committee for Civil Rights, and I'm based here in Monroe County.
Thank you all. And we got started a little late. I was trying to wait for a few more panelists that will be coming to join us, but I want to be respectful of your time, and so I am going to ask Ms. Shatrice to present what she's brought to us today. Thank you.
All right, so I kind of wanted to give an overview from CISA's perspective, so to have a better understanding of what CISA is doing. So that's a cybersecurity infrastructure and security agency. We love security so much we say it twice. And that it is an agency of the Federal Department of Homeland Security. So if you think of like FEMA or TSA, like we're one of those agencies. Next, please. I'm specifically, I've lived and served Indiana. Previous to this role, I was actually the state cybersecurity program director, who focused on a lot of the educational things, a lot of the not only internal focus, but external focus. And what I love about the role that CISA does is we are the key agency in charge of election security at a federal government. So you're seeing probably a lot of our names, though you'll probably see more and more of it as things continue to escalate as we get closer to our November election. I'm part of what we call Region 5, so we're similar to the FEMA regions. What does that mean to you? That means while I'm the cyber advisor here in Indiana, and we have another advisor, he actually oversees in Indiana and Illinois. He lives actually southern Indianapolis as well. What's great about these regions is that we can pull from all the staff of like at a national level, right? So if we have something happen here in Indiana and it goes beyond the scope of just one person or two people, we have the resources to bear when it comes to assisting not only the cyber side, but even also on the physical side as well. In addition to that, in our Region 5, we do have a election security advisor over our region. He came out of the Secretary of State's office in Ohio. All our election security advisors for CISA came from elections. I think together they have like almost 250 years of election experience. And again, what that means, I think, to the public and to clerks and local governments is that, while I have, expertise in certain areas, the best part of my job is I get to pull expertise of other people who also have done this, right? And like lived and breathed it, and also understand best practices. Next, please. So our mission when it comes to elections, right, is to help election officials, our infrastructure, stakeholders protect against not just the cybersecurity, but also physical security and operational security risks during the 2024 election cycle. We obviously know this election cycle is a very intense election cycle. It's very, to Nicole's point, there's definitely some history in this one as well. And with those sensitivities and the threats that we're seeing, we want to be sure to be able to provide those resources. Next, please. So speaking of threats, I think it's always very important to understand where our primary threats are coming from, right? Because we see a lot in the news and we see a lot of, social media and those kind of things. And while that is all things we need to be considering, and most certainly for the clerks to be considering, we do see some very prime threats with these foreign actors. And that's really where we focus on a lot on, for CISA's perspectives, we're focusing on the malign foreign influences on our election process, right? So the People's Republic of China, we do anticipate that they're going to attempt to influence U.S. elections in 2024 at some level, but really kind of focusing on the divisions and causing more divisions. So you're going to kind of see it in maybe not as directive way, but they definitely have an interest in it. We have our second threat being Iran. Much like in the previous election cycles, they've been big players as well, and we do anticipate that they're going to not only try to influence the psychology of the elections, but also influence the operational things alongside of, and same thing with China, like on the U.S. interests, but alongside with interests that we see that would benefit them in those things and willingness to do so like they've done in the past. And then we have Russia, which is very unique in the sense that while you have maybe, China focusing on maybe political candidates that are, pro-China or, those kind of things, Russia just really doesn't like anything we do, right? So they're just going after how can they just cause chaos on our election infrastructure, right? And influencing those operations. We've obviously seen them very out front about it, right? Since our 2016 elections, we absolutely anticipate them being very upfront about where they're going to do, even if it's to cause chaos and mayhem. It may be more along the lines of, and we see this with malign foreign influences, where they may say that they got into systems only to cause that doubt within our society when they actually haven't gotten close to our election systems. So I think those are going to be things we're going to need to consider as we're looking at those news cycles and what's coming out of these kind of key threat actors is, what they want you to believe versus what actually is happening, right? From that perspective. Next, please. Homeland security, we obviously, this is this is the number one priority of CISA right now. And literally everything I'm like living and breathing along with my counterparts, not just again in the cybersecurity, but also physical security realm, working very closely with our Secretary of State's office, our Indiana Department of Homeland Security, Indiana Office of Technology, and a lot of our state partners, as well as our federal partners. I work very closely with the FBI, and we're going to be doing this very lockstep at not only in preparation of, but even on day of, where I'm literally going to be working side by side with Secretary of State's office in understanding our threats and working together and consistently communicating with not just each other, but also with the counties as to, hey, is there concerns leading up to it or following it on those things, and keeping just very lines of communication very open and also confidential so that we can be able to hopefully get ahead of any attacks or any concerns that we may see. We're expecting key events of violence to happen. Unfortunately, it is absolutely unacceptable that any of our poll workers and clerks have to prepare for this. But we are going to see a lot of, not even just from the international side of influence, but we're going to see domestic violence with extremists trying to disrupt the civic process, trying to cause fear before and during the election process. And so a lot of while we are talking most certainly about cybersecurity, we do tie that very closely in with our physical security because people first, right? We have to look at our safety and make sure that we're looking at those threats, working again hand in hand with FBI as we see anything that may be coming up and concerns that may be brought to our attention from clerks or concerned citizens. So those are the things we're taking very seriously and prioritizing right now. And as I said, the risks to our election infrastructure, right? We're looking at physical security aspects. I think the closer and closer we get to election day and the day of election, we almost kind of flip. Right now, we're concerned about cybersecurity between now and election day because it is in the preparation of everything. And then the evening when we're uploading our election results to the state system, we want to be sure that things are as secure as possible with that and everything as the integrity of elections is there. But on election day, and I think this is something that we're working very closely again with our partners on training, is to ensure that we're also providing a lot of resources and de-escalation training, right? And physical security concerns. How do you look for those things? How do you train your poll workers? Those kind of things. And then the other thing too is, as you may know, is elections really does come with a whole lot of laws. I always appreciate clerks and the amount of boundaries they may have when it comes to the things they have to consider. If something happens at a polling place, it's not as simple to say, oh, okay, well, we'll just keep it open for a few more hours. Like, there are very specific laws so that, and truly there for a good reason, so that we have a very fair election and access of election to all voters, by providing that access while also not providing an advantage over other maybe demographics or something. So it's all there for a very good reason. It's not as simple as maybe other aspects of government and their services. And so providing that those operational resources as well for maybe turnover of poll workers or other things that may happen, or even just things we are totally out of our control, right? Like bad weather. In the May primaries, we had 8 confirmed tornadoes during that day, which really kept us on the edge of our seat the entire time. But it really does add a lot of additional considerations in the operations. And again, making sure that safety is the number one priority. And then close to that number one priority is how are we providing a safe and fair election with that. So I think when we talk about like the simple steps that we take, and some of the things, and the good thing too is I would say, Greg and I, we've had many conversations discussing the kind of requirements and not just requirements from a high level best practice perspective, but really trying to focus in on how to kind of put those protective measures in case people do go towards your systems, right? So incorporating multi-factor authentication, right? I mean, that's a very basic thing, but so important because at the end of the day, it's going to be your guard dog, right? They may get into your system, but the multi-factor authentication, which is basically for everybody in the room, I'll never just assume everybody knows, but that thing that makes you like authenticate you are who you are, you're a real person. And so doing that in a variety of ways, and making sure that, even if maybe you don't have it across the board, you have privileges where, like an admin, which I'm sure Greg is for the systems, right? He's the technology officer, is not provided to just anybody, right? So making sure that you're also limiting access to the things that absolutely need to be there. Other things that we have, services that we have for counties that your county is taking advantage of is our cyber vulnerability, cyber hygiene services. So basically that means we're consistently, CISA, federal government is consistently scanning the internet, the whole internet, which is crazy, right? Including your organization, but it allows us to really focus in on your organization, do external scans on the external, what basically the bad actors can also see. And so if we see them first, hopefully, then we're providing those reports to the technology officer in your case. And then, with even a prioritization of like, hey, this is open. We know that this vulnerability and this door, per se, is somebody's going to take advantage of it. Here are some things to consider, and here's how we want to we would say prioritize this, right? So those kind of things really, again, those are what would maybe seem low-hanging fruit, but super effective in really kind of attacking those bad actors ahead of them attacking us. Also getting physical security assessments, and you have to remind me, I think you've worked with our protective security advisor, Stephen Barniarzak, on doing physical security assessments, not just of your what we do is we offer it to not just the clerk's offices and county buildings such as this, but even all the way to the polling locations, right? So saying, hey, here's some low-hanging fruit of how you can make it more secure, of how you're gonna manage crowds, how you're gonna do those things. So that kind of stuff, while again, it seems low-hanging fruit, is super effective and takes care of 75% of the problems, right? Which is what we want to do. We understand local government can't throw, $100,000 to, new camera systems and all this high tech and stuff like that. I think what's really great about the people who work in CISA is that we walk in knowing that's not going to be the case. And so we're looking at saying, hey, you could actually go to Menards and get this for $5 and it would take care of 50% of your problem. Like, we're looking to help in that situation. We're not trying to upsell anybody. We're not doing that. We're truly there to help in that situation. Can you go back, please? I think the .gov domain is something we're transitioning people to, super critical in the sense of not only the additional, a .gov domain, actually CISA owns the high-level .gov, so even an in.gov is a subdomain to that large domain, right? Which means as citizens, when you see .gov, you know it's been verified. Like, there has been a federal agency who has verified it, and not verified because we got a digital application and we're like, hey, we're .gov. Like, when CISA gets those applications, they call me and I have to talk to somebody through a connection I know to verify they are indeed who they are. So we're like triple authenticating that request, right? So do know if you see a .gov, that's been authenticated several times over, so that there can be true trust with the public on those domains, which is why it's super important, right? If you do a .in, US or those kind of things, anybody can do that. And also the bad actors are really good at manipulating those and sending those to other places. So that's something that a lot of government agencies are local government agencies are transitioning to. It takes some time to do that. We probably won't see a lot of that done between now and November if an agency hasn't done that, because it can cause maybe confusion with public and stuff like that. But it's definitely something that would be important to do at some point. Rehearsing your incident response plan, obviously it was, it's very well known. It would hit like news media that you guys did have an attack last month. Was very grateful that Greg, early on, we talked very early on the incident. I think those having those incidents really kind of has you kind of review how are we communicating externally, internally with your federal partners, with your state partners, and then more importantly, even the clerk being able to contact Dustin and say, hey, I have this thing happening. I might need an additional laptop from the Secretary of State's office that's whitelisted while, the technology officer's figuring out how to get everything back online. It really, when it comes to an incident response, it really does become an all hands on deck. It's not on one person alone. I always feel for my IT friends, because everybody looks to them, and while they're there to make sure everything comes back up, the effects of any incident is really at every department head level, right? It's at the leadership level, and really you want Greg focusing on the IT problem. You don't want him focusing on the management of the issues that can come from it. And so having those incident response plans, testing them out. And what's really been great is CISA has partnered with Secretary of State's office, and we've actually done 4 of 6 already. There's last 2 of the first week of September of tabletop exercises where we are testing out with, the county EMA, the county clerk, the county IT person, sometimes commissioners, general counsel, and really kind of going through, hey, a cyber attack happens. This type of cyber attack happens. What do you do? Who are you talking to? Okay, there may be a possible active shooter situation at a polling site. How are you all working together, right? There's a storm coming. How are you doing that? And while it's like, oh, well, I'll figure that out, it is so important to figure those things out and realize those gaps ahead of time, ahead of the bad day, right? So I think the great thing that Monroe County already has going for you guys is that you have a county clerk who's very tied in with the Secretary of State's office and those resources. You have, Greg and I we talk, he's signing up for a lot of our CISA services currently. And I think the great thing is you guys do have in your own backyard some people that could, from IU, that can most certainly be there in a flash and be able to assist with the Applied Center for Cyber, which is always a great resource. So I think you guys have a lot of things already in place for those things, but I always kind of say, you want to go over it again and again, because you can't kind of plan for everything. So really solidifying those communication channels, solidifying how you're going to pull people in and work with them, especially the closer we get to November, is going to be super critical to do. And then, I know Nicole is already a member of the EIISAC, and getting that information of those threats that happen. I mean, again, it's unacceptable, the type of awful things that our clerks and poll workers have to deal with, including, as you may have heard, November of last year with the fentanyl being sent to clerks' offices across the whole nation. And EISAC was very instrumental in that because they were able to literally within a couple of hours take pictures of, hey, if you see this envelope, then don't open it because it has fentanyl in it, right? So being able to really, truly get those more, again, physical in addition to cybersecurity notices out is critical. So these, I would say, if you're really focusing on things to do between now and November, these are the things that we're like, hey, we can't do all of it. We're running out of time, but let's focus on these things. And next, please. I'm not going to go into all this. I want to be respectful of all the other speakers, but I do want to just kind of touch high level on those, again, those threats that we're talking about, right? Who here has heard about phishing? Don't click the link, right? Like, and we have to worry about it even on a personal level, right? They're trying to get into your bank account. They're trying to get into your Facebook account. Like they're trying to get into everything, right? That's no different for government. And I'm pretty sure Greg and Nicole and anybody who works in local government, it keeps us up at night, right? Or like you can do the best that you can in a lot of other things. And you just need to have somebody who had a bad day, who wasn't paying attention to the email. And frankly, with the invention of AI, before it was very obvious. You had misspellings. It was clearly like bad translation issues. Now AI makes it smooth. It makes it very hard to tell. So you have to look even deeper. You have to really look at those links. You have to be very vigilant. And so really the phishing has really like gone up like several layers of a game. And frankly, this worries me more than most things. Because again, when you're looking at a majority, up to 80 to 90% now of cyber attacks that we deal with comes from a people issue. It comes from somebody clicking a link, somebody putting something they shouldn't, put into, a drive. They found a USB drive on the outside, and legit, this has happened here in Indiana where somebody, it was government, the USB, somebody did a drop of a USB. It said employees to be fired. Like, who doesn't want to put that in your computer, right? Like, it's right outside the courthouse, right? And so, I mean, they use the psychology against us, right? And so when you're looking at that, even if you have everything in place you're supposed to, it can still happen. And so again, that's why those incident response plans are important. How you're communicating with each other is important, because bad days can still happen even in a sophisticated environment. Next, please. And we have denial of service attacks, meaning basically, and I was kind of like, for the non-IT people, it's you're in the middle of a room and everybody's talking to you at one time. What do we do as a human? We shut down. Well, technology does the same thing. So it only has so much capacity to handle so many things hitting it, and that people will do this to cause confusion, right? We will see an increase of DDoS attacks on county government websites just to make people question whether or not the county website is okay, or the information on it is correct, right? And if there's a pause in that, again, it's the psychology of it, and so it's really important to have those protections in place, being able to make sure that your website, again, can't be spoofed very easily, which is why that .gov domain is important on those things. Next, please. And then ransomware is a hard one. I mean, ransomware, business email compromise, all these really hard threats to it all come from a person messing up. We really no longer live in the days on cybersecurity where it's like a super tech geek is really going after like the system, right? Like, frankly, they figured it out, and it's very lucrative for bad actors. I mean, it's a $1 trillion industry now, right? So they're making a lot of money, and just like business, they're going to keep doing it because they figured out, why do I spend any effort in taking down the system when I can just manipulate somebody to give me the information, or give me their username and password, or give me access to something, or give me a check, right? And so ransomware, business email compromise, exploiting those known vulnerabilities are super important. But I would say, you know, when you're looking at vulnerabilities in addition to the people problem of it, which means the people is the solution, right? Is that, you know, also still having those very basic cyber hygiene things like making sure you're patching your security updates, right? Making sure that you are looking at your architecture and you have segmentation, making sure you have backups of everything, and it's not backed up on the same network, right? Or you don't have an incident response plan and you never printed a copy and it's on the computer that just got hacked, right? Like those things that like make it harder when bad things happen. That's the kind of stuff that CISA, myself, and a lot of really good partners will help you through to figure that out, because it is overwhelming. It's a lot. But based on our threats landscape, we can at least help prioritize a lot of that. Next, please. And then we also look at like insider threats, physical compromise, right? In addition to those cyber threats. So we're looking at how are, you know, and like how is the protective chain of, you know, command is for your polling, you know, machines, right? How are you protecting those things? What's the chain of custody of those things? You know, you like to think that everybody has the best of intentions, but we want to always prepare that there might be somebody who's just having a bad time in life and they're making bad choices, right? So always giving people the benefit of the doubt, but preparing for the worst, right? And that's a lot of what we also want to make sure, and I know the Secretary of State's office provides a lot of resources on that as well. Next, please. And again, I won't belabor the hazardous materials because we already talked about, but those physical acts of violence, super important to prepare for it. Something, again, we shouldn't have to be doing, but we're just in that state right now where, frankly, it's scary to go anywhere. And I think polling day is going to be intense. You just need somebody to have a bad day, to say the wrong thing, to escalate something. So providing poll workers real good skills, even testing their ability to de-escalate situations, doing role playing and that kind of thing, because it is very intense, and making sure that somebody, if they can't do it well, then how do they transfer it to somebody who can, right? And so kind of doing those trainings are really critical as well. Doxing is a very interesting thing that we're seeing a lot of, which is kind of crazy because it was actually came out of game industry, where if you had like, let's say my kid and the kid down the street, you know, they're competing on on Fortnite, and one is kicking the other one's butt and they're starting to get mad at it, then they would go and call and do like a fake call to 911 to go distract the kid. So then they get like everybody, and like, we don't want like a, Christmas vacation situation where you have like them, coming in and crashing through the windows and that kind of thing. This is happening with elected officials now, and clerks and poll workers and people who are part of the election process, to do two things. One, to cause, again, chaos, distraction, and then it's pulling resources from emergency services, right? And so again, wanting to kind of provide that additional protection. And a lot of that is just having that communication with your emergency services and saying, hey, this is my address. They're going to still send somebody there to check it, but they're probably thinking, yeah, there's a good chance that it's really a doxing situation. Somebody's faking it, but instead of sending the whole cavalry, let's just send a couple of people and make sure they're okay. So those are the kind of things. And next, please. And then we're working with the Secretary of State's office to provide some really great guides in the next couple of months, in addition to the many things that we have been providing them, and they've been providing through a lot of the good resources they've been giving the clerks over the years, but especially this year. So again, we're working with the IT directors or service providers to get those cybersecurity hygienes, those physical assessments, and then being sure we're ready for a bad day with incident response management. Next, please. We have a lot of training ourselves, but again, you see the third bullet, the tabletop exercises. I would definitely, I'm not sure if Monroe County is signed up for it, but we'll make sure to definitely get you guys signed up if you haven't already for the upcoming tabletop exercise. September 5th and 6th, I think, is the Southern Indiana ones. Again, those are really critical. I'm leading them myself, but really, again, testing all those kind of key things, the cybersecurity, cybersecurity, those kind of things. And it's confidential, it's closed to government, so that we can all be very like honest, be like, hey, where are the concerns, where are those issues? And then we can take that back and work with our communities on those things. And then we obviously can do in-person training, but we work a lot with the Secretary of State's office. We don't want to be overlapping on each other or overwhelming the counties. I think that's what really is valuable about our partnership, is that it's more concise and helpful. Next, please. And then we have on CISA, we have Protect 2024. If you go to CISA/Protect 2024, you're going to see a big banner. We also have a resource library. So if any of you are interested specifically, there's a lot of great information. I know Nicole probably has this bookmark on her and along with her staff, but there's a lot of, again, and we're still developing things. More things will come out for this resource library as we get closer. And the great thing about this, it's a live thing in the sense that if we start seeing at a national level, hey, we're starting to see this threat or this type of technique hit more, let's create a training video, let's create some awareness pieces and stuff like that. So that's why this resource library is important and critical for those things. And then, yeah, look, CISA.gov/ can you tell I've done this presentation a couple of times? In an incident situation, when it comes to reporting in the elections, we kind of go with low threshold. So basically, if it worried you, go ahead and talk to us about it. So again, it's a couple of reasons. Maybe you have it handled, and that's great, right? I mean, that was a lot of actually the situation that you guys had. Greg and I had very open communication, but you guys they had a good situation. It sucked, and it really sucked for what, a week. Yeah, but because you guys had backups off-site, you had things in place already, it still just takes time, right? Even in a good situation, it's going to take a minute to get things going, to reset things, that kind of thing. But we would say if it made you uncomfortable, let us know, because we're also collecting that intel. And if we're hearing that through a number of, counties and jurisdictions nationally, then we're like, hey, there's something going on. Bad actors count on people not talking to each other. And so it's something that America doesn't do sometimes the best, right? You have these political differences, but when it comes to these threats, it is very apolitical. They're just wanting to cause mayhem no matter what side. So we got to work together to put that aside and be able to work through what does this mean and share information as fast and easily as possible. So there's that. So we have a report incidents too, but you guys have a good relationship with myself, so myself is enough, and then I work through that process. So. Because even on vacation weeks, I'm still working. And definitely, I'm not leaving Indiana in the next until after November. Now, after November, I may be MIA for about a few weeks, but I think that's a lot of us. So yeah, next, please. And this is my contact information, including my cell phone. I'm a texter, so if you're like, hey, I've emailed you a couple of times, I legit get hundreds of emails a day. So feel free to text me to help prioritize that for me. But again, JD, he's a supervisor over Indiana and Illinois. He's sometimes really busy because, Chicago. But we work really well as a team. And then again, we have security advisors. We have 3 of them that are working to go around Indiana right now, look at those polling places, give those physical security considerations. And then Spencer Wood is our election security advisor. He's also, again, has a lot of experience in the election process and can work really in the detailed elements of it as well. So, this is your CISA team, but again, if it goes beyond the scope of this, what's great is that we pull from other states and their expertise. And so that's why I think what kind of force multiplies, because that's what we need right now, right? We know the bad people are doing it, so it's good to see that good people are doing it too. So that's what I have. Anybody have questions for me? That was a lot of information, so if you have questions in a minute, that's fine too. Thank you. I don't know why I clap myself. That's right. Yes, good for you for clapping. Yes.
Or if you come up with something, we have index cards and pens so that you can write your question out and direct it to who you would like to have answer it. And that's incredible information. I am fortunate as part of the Clerks Association to get these kinds of presentations at our annual conferences and our district, Southern and Northern District conferences. But I want you to be able to understand what I get to understand and ask questions so that you can make informed choices about what we're doing here. So I want to introduce our next presenter, Dustin Renner. Again, his level of knowledge and body of work is so impressive, and the fact that he just makes time to take my call is absolutely phenomenal. And so, Dustin Renner.
Thank you. So yeah, we take election security very seriously in the Secretary of State's office. So much so that we kind of came up with a theme this year called "Blow the Whistle on Election Interference." So we've created a video. I think Kylie's going to play it for us. That kind of describes more about some of the efforts we're taking to secure our election this year.
Secretary of State Diego Morales here. As we gear up for a big election this November, it is more important than ever to be informed on election security. In this video, you will hear from some of Indiana's officials on how we are working to keep Indiana's elections safe and secure. We are blowing the whistle on election interference. Thank you for being here today and the work you do all year long for eligible Hoosier voters and for our state.
It's a rarity that there's a problem during the election, during the actual voting process. That's a rare event in the state of Indiana.
In January of 2017, then Secretary of Homeland Security for the United States designated elections as critical infrastructure. It really emphasized the critical importance, the value of keeping elections safe and secure.
The Indiana Department of Homeland Security is really a coordinating agency with other state and local officials, the city, county level, state police, FBI, our Secretary of State's office, working with the Indiana Office of Technology, really looking at how can we ensure that the polling equipment is protected. It's a very real threat that we take very seriously.
Our approach to election security during the 2024 cycle is to directly help support local election officials who are sometimes under-resourced. Two of the new campaigns that we introduced this year, first of all, hiring 10 election security advisors like myself, who are bringing over 200 years worth of election security and administration experience. We have also recently launched our #Protect2024 program, where we are prioritizing physical, cyber, and operational security initiatives to help state and local election officials with their election security efforts.
It's very important for their local county clerks to have a good relationship with their local police department, the sheriff's department, the Indiana State Police. It's necessary in case one of those events occur where there's a disruption at the poll, election officials are trained in how to de-escalate in order to diffuse the situation and make sure people have the opportunity, the right to vote, and that vote is documented accurately and fairly.
We're excited to be working with the Secretary of State's office on election security because these are skills that everybody needs to know, how to de-escalate conflict, to not act out of anger or those kinds of feelings that are going to make you be irrational, and to attack the problem, not the person. So if somebody comes in, they're loud or they're boisterous, try to ask them questions and draw information from them.
Listening skills are the foundation to conflict de-escalations. The important thing is to remain calm, signal for help. If a situation is escalated, oftentimes they don't feel like they're heard and they don't feel like you're the person that can resolve the issue. So bringing in reinforcement to help with that situation is extremely important.
You also need to know if things keep on escalating, when it's the right time to get the authorities involved in law enforcement. The Secretary of State's office has produced some great materials that everybody that works in the polls should take a look at before and check out the website. These situations are very rare, but when they come up, you want to be prepared and you want to be educated on what to do.
We were involved in the certification of election equipment for the state of Indiana, and a big part of that is the security of election equipment in terms of its cybersecurity as well as its penetratability to make sure that it's safe and secure.
It's very difficult to stay one step ahead. But again, there are some very brilliant people, men and women out there who are This is their mission, and that's our mission at the Indiana Department of Homeland Security, is to ensure a safe, secure, and resilient Indiana for all Hoosiers. If you look at the number of people involved and the work that it takes for a citizen to go and cast their ballot, all of the supporting staff in the background, it's amazing. And it is a year-long process.
The American people should have confidence in the way the nation executes our election processes. Here in Indiana, they are specifically run by state and local election officials who are truly our friends, our neighbors, and sometimes our family. They are the golden thread of our democracy.
I hope hearing from these officials gave you more insight into how Indiana is continuing to lead the way as a model for election security. Elections aren't a Democrat or Republican issue. Elections impact us all, and it's a team effort. I'm proud to work on this team and alongside each of you. Thank you for what you do, providing Hoosiers with the elections they expect and deserve. Keep up the good work.
I know, right?
So yeah, as I mentioned, we take election security very seriously. I'm in the Secretary of State's office, and so to kind of back up to the beginning of when this all became about was probably at the end of the Obama administration after the 2016 election, when kind of the election integrity narrative really started to take off. So as was mentioned in the video, 2017 elections were deemed critical infrastructure. And then so from 2020 on, we've all seen the myths, disinformation that has been going around. And so elections they're very complex operation. There are various aspects of elections based on your level of participation. There's audits, there's recounts, there's cybersecurity, there's physical security, there's communications, and there's voting. And so very few, I think, get to see the whole encompass of what it takes to go into the elections and all the bipartisan processes and checks and balances that we have in place that really keep our elections safe and secure. And so, as Shatrice kind of mentioned, we work with a variety of partners, CISA being one of them. I don't think there's a week that goes by that I don't talk to Shatrice in some format. Also, state DHS, as you saw in the video, state police, the Indiana General Assembly. So we are an executive office, so we are not policymakers, so we have to work with the General Assembly to have any sort of policies enacted. And one of those policies that we had enacted this year, we worked very closely with the Clerks Association to help them shepherd through one of their priorities, which was to make intimidating, harassing, threatening a poll worker a level 6 felony. And so we defined what a election worker is. So we're very pleased about that. Like I said, we work with clerks. We work with the National Association of Secretary of States. And also, one of the other things we did, I don't have it with me. I don't know if you guys have it, the manual that we made, blow the whistle. So we made a blow the whistle on election interference manual. And so really what it is, if you Google election security, you're going to get so much overwhelming information. And so what we did, we really went out and vetted some information and pulled best practices and put them together all in one resource for counties to use, because it's the Secretary's desire to really provide tools and resources to the counties. And so we recently sent that out. She has it there. But aside from that, as Shatrice mentioned, we have various 6 tabletop exercises throughout the state that we're currently completing. We also, I don't know if you talked about the incident monitoring that we do on Election Day, where all the various agencies check in periodically and we work together if issues arise. For instance, on primary election day, the Rush County Courthouse was struck by lightning and they lost internet access, which is a little bit of a complication because if they didn't have internet, they would not be able to input their election results that evening. So we worked very quickly with the vendor to get them a secure network to restore their access to SPRS where they could input their election results that evening. So that is what we do in the Secretary of State's office regarding election security. I don't know if Jerry, if you want to add anything else.
Well, I want to apologize for being late, but when I heard Shatrice was presenting, I thought, well, we're done here. I guess I'd like to leave time for questions. We'd like to know what your questions are and concerns. I don't know if we can answer them, but we can certainly try. I do appreciate everybody's interest. That's encouraging that people are interested ahead of time. We are just doing a lot to get prepared. We have a lot of people, resources at all levels of government. We've been monitoring elections. I've been working for 18 years with the state election, and we're always monitoring every election. We've always got a team, but we've got a big team put together. We really could call out the cavalry if anybody had a problem. I'll just mention one piece, though, and that is, from my perspective, the concern that election administration is a source of cybersecurity problems, I think, is maybe overstated a bit. The state manages the statewide voter registration system. That system is an election management system. It does about 100 things that are necessary to run elections, from building districts on a GIS map to putting in those precincts on the districts and putting those address tables and voters in those precincts, to managing the election calendar, and obviously registering, maintaining voters who are people who turn 18, people who pass away, managing the candidates lists and building the ballots, and then election day, administering the tabulation, reporting, does all that. So it's really necessary. It's a statewide virtual private network. It's not really exposed to the internet, but through our management, through our vendors, the core team, which is a bipartisan group, meet every 2 weeks. We spend 2 or 3 hours talking about that system and everything that it does. So we think that's secure. The risk is if a county's network becomes unstable, the access to that might not be available. And so our mission, which we've been preparing for, is how do we reestablish access to that statewide voter registration system through supplying equipment, as Shatrice said, whitelisted equipment that we've got locked up. We can bring down, and it's not been exposed to anything, to connecting through the BMV, through state police resources, through secure mobile hotspots through a neighboring county. We're ready to help with that, and that's probably the key to running your election, is being able to have access to that system. So I'll just stop there and let you all proceed with your program. Thank you.
Thank you for coming. I can only imagine how busy you are.
I was a student here in the 70s, and when I start driving down here, I start to get kind of dizzy. And but it's great to be back.
I want to transition. Thank you again. I want to transition with the rest of our panelists based on your professional expertise, your vision for what we need, a piece that we can have in Monroe County that helps us as it relates to cybersecurity and elections. And I'll start with Kylie.
I think mainly for my end of all the information that I've been getting from voters and people in the community that want to register to vote here, that are going to be students that don't understand how to or don't feel safe doing it online. And that's my main reason of wanting to be here today, to be part of this, to get more information, but also to voice the opinions of our voters as well. And recently I've been getting calls after the incident that happened here in Monroe County, of students that are coming back to town that were registered or have not registered yet, that are now concerned and asking if they should just stay registered back home and then vote by mail instead. And so it's just making sure that they know that Monroe County is safe and that it is secure and that they can rely on the elections here. And just so that they have that information that I can take back to them as well.
Oh, I'm just blown away by Latrice and the information accordingly. I mean, from my experience in regards to first time from a candidacy and such, of what the process is and just the explanation in regards to the average citizen knowing what actually is occurring. And with that information, trying to get some of this out to the general populace of our community as a whole so they understand to address some of Kylie's concerns, right? Are we here? Is it safe? And then to the point of what you brought up in regards to it, even the poll workers that we have to recruit accordingly, which sometimes are unexperienced, young people, retired people that may not have that, how we go through and explain these things, because from the experience of what I've seen, sometimes people get a little irate if they're in the wrong precinct or that, and the right to vote is something that each American holds dear and true. So having these situations, how we do that so that it's smooth and it's easy to do. And then on a professional basis, from a power standpoint, I'm an electrical contractor. So, when we look at these particular areas and such, and as you said, internet's down, power's down, the backup things that we have to make sure that it comes in, because when 6 o'clock comes, 6 o'clock comes. And if they're in line, it's that one person that pulls in and they're irritated, but the rules are the rules. So we have to apply, but I mean, I'm just blown away. I had no idea that we were so safe, so secure, and had so many backup plans to ensure that everything that happens in our county is done correctly, and we get the results that are the right results, not the results that may just be talked about. Yeah.
I think there's more information coming out in the coming months too, because the clerks will get together in September, and so we're working between September and obviously through October. I know Dustin and I, we've talked, and Jerry and I talked about even getting like a sheet to polling sites of like, who's your internet provider, who's the person we need to talk to if there are problems with the site. Like those things, again, makes things more efficient. And then there's also a product that CISA is going to be developing from some content that we worked with Secretary of State's office on, like if there's a fire, if there is a physical altercation, if there's a cyber attack, like who are the people you need to call, and here's the numbers in one quick sheet, right? Because you don't want to go through where do I find that online? Because time does matter on election day, right? We can't spend 4 hours looking for the right contact, right? We need to do it right then there, and be able to escalate it quickly to the clerk and to the state. So I do know, even with everything that we have now, there's even more information coming out that we're working closely with the Secretary of State's office.
This event has been both confidence-inducing, but also, to be honest, fear-inducing. Right. I doubt I'm alone in feeling that way. It's good to be real about the threats that we're facing. And in our nonpartisan work, from a racial equity perspective, talking with voters of color, low-income voters, all voters, we're available to all voters. We hear a lot of questions and a lot of fears in these times. And I think we could all understand and be empathetic to where people are coming from if they're taking in headlines, taking in incorrect information, taking in factual information. Even that can be fear-inducing. I hope we can rise to the occasion together and meet voters where they are, and all of us as different reliable sources of information, meeting voters where they are and hearing them out. No question is too small or too silly, and providing accurate information. We do that from our part through our 866 Our Vote nonpartisan voter protection hotline. We get flooded with calls, particularly on election day, and our focus is Illinois and Indiana. And so how can we, in this moment, also talk about voting and civic engagement in a joyful way? Joy might be the opposite of this cybersecurity related event, but I hope it can all be consistent, that we have a big turnout problem in Indiana. We know that as a reality. This doesn't make things any easier, the landscape we've been talking about today. But we have time, a discrete amount of time, but we have time nonetheless to support and energize voters. So I really would like to see that injected in these conversations as well. And I appreciate Clerk Brown for your vision to bring us here together for what I feel has the makings of a constructive conversation. And advocates are looking for more, voters are looking for more in terms of information and support and empathy during a time like this. There are several different coalitions that I have the privilege to be a part of, and one of them is a nonpartisan civic coalition called All In for Democracy. It's co-convened by our esteemed leaders at League of Women Voters of Indiana, Common Cause Indiana, and others. And I can tell you that in that space, with a lot of people who work with diversity of voters on the ground in communities all over Indiana. I'm here in Monroe County. I'm a little bit more tunnel vision focused on home right here. But we work with folks from all over the state, from my hometown of Fort Wayne, and all over. And people are hungry for more information about the blow the whistle on election integrity. Election interference, I'm sorry. Blow the whistle on election interference initiative, and have requested, can we sit down and meet with the state, meet with the Secretary of State's office to learn more. How do we factually and fairly respond to voters who are worried about over-policing? If that's not what intended by this, which it might not be from what I'm hearing and learning today, which I really appreciate, let's make that clear. Let's set those fears aside by providing factual information. So I would welcome more of this, please. This is my long way of saying, let's all be in conversation more, because if we don't want people to be worried, if we want more eligible voters to be participating, then we have our work cut out for us, but I believe that together we can do it.
Thank you. Well, each of you has teed up for me perfectly what I wanted to say as far as a best practice or vision in Monroe County, because all 92 clerks are in communication with me all the time. My email inbox every day. But I only control the piece in Monroe County. And so for me, the best practice or vision, particularly as it relates to cybersecurity and elections, is for each of my election computers to have a cybersecurity infrastructure that is beyond reproach, because I want everybody on this panel, everybody in this room, everybody who gets to watch this and experience this to feel confident in what we deliver on election day. And so that's why I brought this together selfishly for me, so that I can reassure my voters here in Monroe County, but also so that you could all hear that it's not just me, and that we deliver a quality election and have our citizens not worry about our elections. And so that would be my best vision or best practice.
I similarly have very brief comments, but I think first and foremost, the thing that is worth repeating and saying so that you hear a multitude of voices saying it, is that we're very fortunate in the state of Indiana. Previously, Shatrice led our general cybersecurity for the state for many years, and we had been working together for a very long time. But the state has invested a lot of money, capital, resources into our cyber response across the board, not just in relation to elections, but just across the board around our critical infrastructure. Furthermore, here in Monroe County, we are very fortunate to be one of the leading institutions. And then in collaboration with Purdue, we have some of the best cybersecurity infrastructure in the country. IU employs more cybersecurity professionals than any other university in the country, and that connection to this region puts us in a very strong position and a good posture. And so I think that to the general public, it is important to realize that as much as when we talk about and we're aware of these type of threats, and when you hear these sort of big, global threats, vectors, I think sometimes it sort of can elevate the problem maybe to making you think that, that people in Iran are sitting there thinking right now, like, Monroe County county. You know, that's the place we're going for. But realistically, we have put a lot of investment, the governor's office has, and across the state in creating a strong infrastructure. And also at the county level, we've done that as well. The only thing that I can add, just as a reflection, and I think that this is building off of what our colleagues from the Secretary of State's office said, is that the way that we react to any type of a cyber incident or cyber threat is going to be reflective of the way that we would react to other incidents that would happen. You think about, imagine if in a county, election workers had locked something in a room at Election Central, and nobody knew, hey, where was the thing and who was supposed to be there, and the way that we would react in that setting is the same way that we would react if that had been a cyber incident. Okay. And so what we have to realize is that those type of physical structures that exist, how we communicate, how we share information, how we're informing each other of issues, how we're communicating with voters if there's any delays or changes, are going to be the way that we do those in cyber incidents. And so I think just an important point, and building off this point, that we don't want to sort of take cyber and just act like it's this separate thing and then we have all these other elements, is that this is sort of an ecosystem. And so the way that we operate as a local government and as public officials, et cetera, is of paramount importance. And the last thing I'll say, just in my personal capacity, not in either my government role or in my IU role, is just that in the long term, and sitting next to Greg, I would really like to encourage our county government to invest more in our IT infrastructure. We have some of the best IT people, but having a one-man show, not only give him a raise, but hire 7 more people to be in his office. So, and I will say that every time I get a chance. So, we can find $100,000, and we should find that money, and we should put it toward our cyber infrastructure. Thank you.
Well said. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's such a pleasure. I think it is right to celebrate the progress that we've seen, especially since 2016. But I remember writing an op-ed in the summer of 2015 calling for elections to be classified as critical infrastructure, and now we have a federal agency that's designed to protect it. We didn't have the election infrastructure ISAC, right? The last 10 years, I think, should be rightly celebrated. And for the voters, thinking about the number one goal of these foreign adversaries that were just highlighted is just undermining confidence in our voting systems.
Right.
And the way that they win is by letting them do that and not expressing your vote. So all of these people that you see up here are involved in just really substantial and exciting ways to get to the next level of election security. And we can all do our part by casting the vote. As far as kind of best practices for election infrastructure, we're looking at paper trails usually to basically back up, make sure that you can put your hands on if need be, and do a risk limiting audit. Only 13 states, I think, correct me if I'm wrong, guys, have risk limiting audits, and Indiana, I think, is one of them now, right? So again, that's also exciting progress in the right direction. One other quick note, just because it's fresh in my mind, because I have a 6th grader right now. Digital citizenship here in Monroe County. We have some education in the schools around digital citizenship. I don't think we do enough in this specific context in that way, right? So it's not just, spreading lies, right? Maybe doing more to spotting deep fakes, right? Thinking a little bit more broadly about, what is your role as a citizen and engaging online with the different nonprofits and other communities. So there could be a fun partnership to explore there with MCCSC. IU's happy to play a part in that. CACR did some of those original election tabletops as well. We loved it. Happy to do more to help, but that could be another way to help get the next generation up to speed, maybe even more so than we are.
Dr. Madeira has joined us, and I thank you for coming. I know you had a previous engagement. If you would like to introduce yourself, your background, and your best vision or best practice for Monroe County elections as it relates to cybersecurity and elections.
Sure. Thank you very much for this opportunity. My name is Dr. Jody Madeira. I am professor of law at the Indiana University Maurer School of Law. And I usually do a little bit different type of research, which is law and emotion, or the role law plays in our lives. we hope that law and cybersecurity law in particular doesn't play too much of a role in our lives, because that means usually bad things, but this summer we've realized that we can all become vulnerable, at a county level, at an individual level. And once we are vulnerable at one level, we're vulnerable at multiple levels. And so I have two contributions. The first is that, I should also mention that I'm the Democratic primary winner, so the Democratic nominee for District 3 for County Commissioner. So I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that role as well. But I'm answering here today as a legal expert. And so one of the most important emotions and I think benefits of citizenry is the benefit to confer trust in the government. And so there are all types of different ways to cultivate trust. I just came from an event, our law school orientation, where I'm trying to cultivate trust in these new law students that are going to be joining us and whom we're going to mentor for the next 3 years and who are eventually going to become our colleagues. But the need to inculcate trust in citizenry is very, very important as well. And it's such a lack of trust we've had, since particularly 2020, accusations of election fraud are very rife. And so while we've been blessed not to have that on the local level here, I think that's always a potential risk, just like a cyber attack. So I think one of the biggest things we can do to cultivate trust is just communicate that we have plans, right? So, and it can be a technical communication. It can be a communication that says we're looking at these issues. We don't have to be exactly descriptive of, first we're going to do X and then we're going to do Y. But we just generally have to say we have crisis communication plans in place. You will hear from these individuals. Once something happens, we should have regular communications, and there is always concerns like law enforcement and what we can air and talk about, and we have to be very mindful of those, but we should also communicate those limitations and say, and I think we've been very good at that here, we want to be more forthcoming, but we can't because we're just getting to the bottom of these, and that could compromise an investigation, for example. And so I think trust is first and foremost what is on our plates with this election season, particularly, and that's on every level, but especially on the local level as well. And part of that goes towards what is not just what is in our election infrastructure, but what is connected to our election infrastructure. And so on a technical level, as Dr. Shackelford can share, one of the key ways in isn't just through the election system. It's also through things connected with the election system that don't seem at first to be related. But if there's vulnerabilities in one system, that can actually lead through backdoors to the election system. And so oftentimes when we look at the election infrastructure, we're just like, okay, let's look at the physical storage of the election machines. Let's look at this, let's look at that, but we forget to look at public transportation systems. And if there's a vulnerability there, that can lead to a vulnerability in the election structure as well. So I think that makes our job more challenging. But again, if we're covering all our bases, that means covering all our systems, all our ways into election systems.
Thank you so much. And what you said as far as plans kind of helps me transition into the next part of our discussion, which is where Monroe County is in alignment with the vision and with best practice. And unfortunately, the commissioners were invited to this event, but it kind of falls to you as the representative of Monroe County government. My hope would be that you would share where we are currently in alignment so that we can celebrate that in Monroe County, and the areas where we are not in alignment, the commitment or the plan or the best practice that we can implement, because October is going to get here and we're going to have early voting, and I want every person who leaves here to be able to reassure anybody that they communicate with that Monroe County is in lockstep with best practices in our vision.
Absolutely. So, first of all, the commissioners would like to apologize. They were unaware that it was an invite for panelists, and they were previously committed to other things, but they would like to make it known that they fully support Clerk Brown, the elections operations, and the Secretary of State's office in all your cybersecurity efforts, and they support that 100%. They just wanted that to be known. But for the last couple of years, I took over 2 years ago as the IT director for Monroe County government, and immediately upon starting that, we were able to reach out to entities like CISA, MSISAC, which is the multi-state Internet Securities Office, the Indiana Office of Technology, known as IoT, IU and Purdue Cybertrack Extension, So we have been in the process for over 2 years of having cyber assessments done through various entities. That way we've got multiple sets of eyes, not just one perspective on what our security posture looks like. We've taken the recommendations that IU Purdue CyberTrack has made, as well as some of our third-party vendors, and we've acted on those as quickly as possible. Some things move fast, some don't. Sometimes it's a budgetary thing we have to overcome temporarily to get things moving forward. Other times it's an infrastructure restriction that's keeping you from moving forward. So under this commissioner's administration, they have actually put substantial investment the last 2 years into the county's infrastructure. That way we could implement the security implementations that we need to make to give the county a better posture. If they had not, this recent event that we had would have been much worse. We would have saw much greater ramifications from it. Our downtime would have been significantly higher than what it was. Part of that downtime is related to having third-party forensics and other members coming in looking at that. You can't immediately go in and start cleaning up the house till the investigation's done. You don't want to destroy any evidence. So that made it take a few extra days. So the county actually had a really good posture in getting itself back up despite of what happened. Also, the way we were able to mitigate, it could have been far worse. Our systems picked up, detected, and shut down connections. So it was very, very isolated what was accessed on it. During that part, there was no part of any elections data or anything like that that was ever compromised or touched on our systems. So with that work, we're still moving forward. Cybersecurity is not a destination. I want to make that clear. It is a marathon, it is a goal, but it is not a destination, because for everything you address now, these hackers are working 10 guys to every one of yours to figure out how to get around this. And when you start talking with state-sanctioned hackers, the money here isn't the motivation for them. They're drawing huge paychecks from these foreign governments that are paying. Their intent is solely to disrupt process and get a paycheck from their employer. And this is growing because their funding, in a lot of instances, are much larger than many of the counties, especially here in the state. We've got a lot of small counties that I'm fortunate. I've got a 12-man team. I've got some things behind me. A lot of counties do not have that. And that's where you stole a lot of my key points there. I should have put on a helmet so you couldn't read my thoughts. But between the Secretary of State's office, the Indiana Office of Technology, they have made so many contracts for security implementations possible that most counties, including our own, could not have brought in on their own and then maintained after that. So we are continuing to work with all the entities we can. We're speaking with other governments. We're speaking with the schools. We're pulling everything we can to make sure that we keep improving on the security posture. And right now we're getting ready to go through another round with CISA with what's called pen testing. And what that is they'll basically bring in what's called an ethical hacker or a white hat hacker. And they will go through your systems from the outside in, just like a hacker does, to try to identify any security vulnerabilities you have so that you can address them before your black hat threat actors hit it. So we are constantly in this process. It's an evolution, it's a growth, and we are going through that as quickly as possible.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, at the beginning, you were offered an opportunity with index cards to prepare questions for based on what you've heard today, or questions that you might have had coming in. And so if you have done so, I am going to ask if Kylie will collect those. And I've asked that you let us know who the question is directed to and then ask the question. So I'm hopeful that you've put those on there. And we did not ask for anybody to identify themselves. We just want to share information here and get our questions answered. If you haven't had an opportunity, the index cards are in the back. Sir?
Can we circle back to one thing real quick?
Absolutely.
So I just wanted to subdue some concerns that were mentioned about policing the polls. That's certainly not the intent of the book. And Indiana Code 3-6-6-36 actually prohibits law enforcement from being at the polls or in the chute. Yeah, because we're it's sensitive to voter discrimination. Yeah, and so they're only allowed to be there if they're summoned, if there's an incident, or to vote.
If there's a breach of the peace.
Yeah, breach of the peace.
Who's in the poll is regulated, and really the poll inspector or the captain could summon law enforcement if there was a breach of the peace. I'm going to step over here a little bit. You saw in our film there, we started planning this project over a year ago. And early on, we engaged the Peace Learning Center. We had a couple people there talk because we knew that there was concern about de-escalation, about both inside and outside the polls. We've really continued when we're doing our tabletop exercise, which I think we'll probably have maybe 60 counties by the time we're done, where we've invited law enforcement. We've really reached out to our local law enforcement to just inform them about these kind of issues. People have the right to carry weapons in Indiana, but they don't have rights. You can use those weapons to protect yourselves, but you can't use those weapons to intimidate somebody. When you go from protecting yourself to intimidating someone with a weapon, that's a felony. So we have laws in Indiana. You cannot intimidate voters, cannot intimidate or injure poll workers or election officials. So we're doing some education about that because we're sensitive. We're also we've been working with the Indiana Civil Rights Commission, with the Justice Department, with the Brennan Center to try and kind of understand this whole environment about the tension between accessibility and then election security, tension between different people's rights. Candidates and political groups have some First Amendment rights, and then, again, election workers have the right to do their work, and voters have the right to do that. Professor, yesterday some law students got in touch with us, and they want to do a seminar on this issue about accessibility and rights. Cynthia Baker, do you know Cynthia?
Yes.
Yeah, well, we'll be back around to you because they're actually interested in the very issue that you talked about.
Excellent.
I'm going to just mention before we start with the questions, this is a really exciting time. We do voter registration at our office. We have people around the state doing that and been doing that for years. Typically, we'll set up a voter registration table and maybe have 10 or 20 people will register during a day. This last week at the state fair, instead of the typical 10 or 20, we've had like over 100 people registering, sometimes 150 people registering. We have a lot of people coming up. We have iPad system checking their voter registration, make sure that it's current. We think we have good accessibility through indianavoters.com to check your registration, update your registration. So I think it's an exciting time. This is going to be a really great election. Voter registration was up before the primary, and we think it's going to be up a whole lot by the time we get close to November. So we're happy about that. I also mentioned in Indiana, university students are welcome to register where they're attending school. If there's any question about their registration, they can always vote a provisional paper ballot, and they got 10 days to sort out that issue. So there's never a reason I think someone shouldn't go out and vote, and then you can check online pretty well. Actually, the law, I think the U.S. Supreme Court said this, the National Voter Registration Act, it really contemplates that people might be registered more than one time, that's not a crime, or it's possible. The default is to register and not to not register someone. So you move from one place to another. There's going to be a time when you'll be registered in both places. It's not legal to vote 2 times, but it's not really a structural problem for someone to be registered more than once. That's our problem, and that's an election administration problem. So we do support people registering to vote. Yeah. So you don't want to.
I want to just thank you for that and ask if it's possible for us to stay in conversation. So when voters are contacting us, we're giving them the accurate, up-to-date information.
We do. We owe some information to Julie Vaughn and the Common Cause group because we've started some conversation in Indianapolis about that, and we've been intending to. We got a little busy with our tabletop groups, but we'll happy to keep you informed. Happy to hear what your concerns are. I mean, it's true in the 50s and 60s in Alabama and Mississippi, a police car would be parked right in front of the polls, and that would intimidate people from voting, no question about it. So, and that's certainly not what we want. And we're hearing back from law enforcement. We've talked to the state police. They don't have the resources to police the polls. They certainly want to be responsive, and we're trying to make sure that law enforcement knows who the election administrators are, what the calendar is, where you're doing the election activities so that they can respond. We don't anticipate over response, but we think, so we're making them aware of that concern too, of going overboard with that.
Sure.
Dr. Shackelford mentioned the post-election audits. So yes, we do those. We just wrapped up the last one for the primary 2 weeks ago. But he also mentioned the VVPATs, the voter verifiable paper audit trail, and I do want to mention that we also use those in Indiana as well.
Excellent. What I've done is I've put the questions in order so that if our out-of-town guests have to excuse themselves, that we got those questions first, and then the rest of us are local, and hopefully I can get you to stay a little bit longer. So the first is for Dustin Renner or Jerry Bonnet. When Rush County lost internet, did they lose access through e-poll books?
So they probably would have lost the ability to communicate to SVRS momentarily while SVRS was down.
Yeah.
But the e-poll books, they're to be on their own isolated, secure network when they're deployed. So those would still be operational. So once we were able to get their system back online, that's when they were able to reconnect the e-poll books to the statewide voter registration system.
And they also had, those kind of contingency plans, right? So they had Cradle, they had their emergency manager bring in, so they were able to connect back online very quickly as they were working through getting energy back up. And then they were prioritized, obviously, with their energy provider. And, and we even do outreach with our Indiana Utility Regulatory Commission, who does outreach even to our energy providers so that they aren't doing non-critical work on election day, right? Because we don't want, just somebody doing something they could wait another day, right? And now you lost power to an area that has polling centers. And so, and we, all our providers, I used to work at the Utility Regulatory Commission, that they always were very accommodating with that. They understand they don't want to be also in the news as the reason why somebody couldn't vote. So they were like, yes, thanks for the reminder. And so really, even for a majority of energy providers, it's only essential things that they do, and they prioritize if they're, the coordination piece that we work with, and I've been doing that with the state. I was the main coordinator for forever, was on election day, starting a couple of days before, on election day, and even a couple of days after, like on 2020, is that we are consistently talking with our Emergency Operations Center with Homeland Security. We're consistently talking with the counties and their emergency managers. So we have a very good situational awareness of things happening as they're happening. And then we're talking to each other saying, hey, how can we quickly get somebody on the line, right? Like if that means, hey, I need to make a call within a minute so that somebody can call Duke Energy president to make sure they need to prioritize this spot, that literally happens. And so that's something most certainly people can be assured of, is that those communications are happening absolutely very quickly. So
let me throw in on a little more technical level. So our electronic poll book system, which the Secretary of State administers the certification of, they can operate independently of the internet. They generally have backups, battery backup systems. Before the electronic poll book, we had paper polling lists, paper poll books. So in every county, there's digital media where they can quickly print a poll list. If the system becomes inoperable, we can assist with that. Some counties print them up ahead of time and just to have them, but they don't like to have all that data sitting around that's sensitive. So, but we could print them up and have the state police zipping them out to a county. Even though we have vote centers, the vote center is still virtually operating on precinct-based. So we can go back to quickly revert to the sort of traditional poll book, paper poll book system used for probably more than 200 years. Right. if it was a really extreme situation. So it's been pretty carefully thought through. The electronic poll book is very efficient. It allows for vote centers where you can vote anywhere because the poll book locks you out from voting a second time somewhere as soon as you vote. But it's not really insurmountable because we know how many people voted. We have everybody signing in, so on and so forth. So we're aware of the contingencies that can happen and have some plans on how to address this.
Thank you. This next question is for, they called you Dustin. Is Indiana likely to stop using DRE voting machines soon, or at a minimum, require a VVPAT on all of them? Is the VVPAT printout truly voter verifiable? If it has a QR code, that is what really counts, is it not?
So the county clerks are actually the ones who choose their election equipment vendor. And that process is, we're not really involved in that process. The election vendor, so start from the beginning. So the election vendor would submit a application with the Indiana Election Division. Then the Indiana Election Division would pass that application off to VSTOP, which is the Voting System Technical Oversight Program that's administered by Ball State University. So they would test the voting equipment just to verify that it does everything that it says it's supposed to do. And then they would issue send that recommendation on to the Indiana Election Commission, who would then approve the equipment for use. And that's when the county clerks are able to step in and choose their own election vendor. So as far as the VVPAT, yes, every DRE machine in the state has a VVPAT as of July 1st. And as you're voting on the DRE, the VVPAT will scroll along as well, so you can see your selections. I'm not 100% certain on if it has a QR code on there or not, though.
Well, if there's any misunderstanding, the reason it's called voter verifiable is that every voting machine in Indiana has to have a voter verifiable paper trail. So it's not a QR code. You have to be able to see if it's an auto mark, auto scan, optical scan. There's going to be the paper, which is the ballot, which will have the who you're voting for with some dots. The machine's going to count those dots, but you're going to see, take it over and put it through the machine or put it into the box. The DRE machines that have been retrofitted have like a cash register tape in a box with a plastic window, and you basically see your receipt as you put the votes in. It's printed on there, so you see that what's printed on there matches what you put on the machine. And so then that tape stays with the machine. They may carry the electronic media to the county clerk's office to tabulate the votes. If that gets damaged or there's a question, then they got this paper tape to go back to. There's high-speed reader machines we have that will go through and read those tapes really fast and summarize that. But it should be by law voter verifiable. So there's maybe 4 different systems in the state.
We have 4 different voting machines.
The people who certify them, which what he's saying, it has to be voter verifiable to get certified to use in Indiana. The General Assembly passed a law 5 or 6 years ago. It was Secretary of State's responsibility, which we just accomplished this month, that every machine used in the state has that equipment. So we think we're where we ought to be with that.
These next 2 questions are directed to Greg Crone. The first is, how did the hackers gain an invitation to our system? Invitation is in quotes. And 2, did we have to pay them?
So the forensics examination is still not complete, so I can't comment to that first question exactly how that came in till that final report's completed by our third party. So I'm sorry, can you repeat the second question?
The second was did we have to pay them?
There has been no ransom paid to the hackers. That's correct. There has been no ransom paid.
The next questions, they're directed to the commissioners and IT. It's 5 questions and then a comment. The first question, when will we know more about the cybersecurity attack that took place last month?
I don't have an exact date for the completion of this. We are It is winding up, so I expect within the coming weeks, no more than probably 30 days, we should have a final report out to the public about the extent and what all transpired there.
And if I may, just to provide also context of where things are, because I know sometimes we will have cyber attacks and we will not know the vector, how it came in, how they got invited. Sometimes it's very clean and it's clear. Sometimes a bad actor gets in and they do a good job at basically dusting off their footprints coming in. So just to set expectations that the report may say unknown, and that's not, I see that more often than not, unless it's a very clean attack, we caught it quickly, they weren't able to, backtrack and do those things. So just to provide some context for people.
These attackers are good about going in and cleaning up their tracks. They don't want you knowing how they got in.
Yeah, they don't want, yes.
If everybody knew how they did it, then the magic's gone, right? Everybody can block their bag of tricks. So it's very in-depth. We're making sure we go through it as deeply as we can so we don't miss anything. If the evidence is there, we want to find it.
And Monroe County is in the process of getting signed up for that vulnerability management. So basically what CISA will do to assist with, if they hopefully they find it and it's something that can be remedied. If they don't, the good thing is, as the backup of that, right, will be that we then will do our own vulnerability scans, right? And we'll say, hey, we're seeing these openings, you may want to go close it up, and maybe one of those openings was the way they got in, right? That at that point you're just assumptions, but hopefully we're closing those doors more and more as we go through it. So I think that's another reason why they're excited, and we're prioritizing counties to get that vulnerability management scan done. And then, as Greg said earlier, they're signed up. I'm not sure if that'll happen between now and the election, but the penetration testing will also be, again, we have crazy, ridiculously talented people at CISA that came from CIA, NSA, and Google, and white hackers that will go into your system and say, hey, we were able to get in this far, or got in through this. We were able to move through your system, which will be great, because then your county will get that report, and most certainly not a report that we would ever suggest to be made public, because public also means good people see it, but bad people see it too, right? So we always have to kind of find that balance. But yeah, so that's the other, just for consideration.
The next question, and I think you've answered it, but if you want to reiterate the highlights, what do you plan to do so this does not happen again?
Well, obviously, like I said, we're going through with a fine-tooth comb, making sure we've got all the doors locked and the windows are closed. What the county has already been in the process of doing, we've actually stepped up employee cybersecurity training so that they're aware of the risk both for at work and for their own personal. We've actually changed a few policies as far as how employees interact with our data and for their day-to-day jobs. We went through and verified that everything we have is on least amount of privilege. So if you don't need that, shouldn't have any reason in your job duties to access data, you can't get into it. That way there's no lateral security problem should an account get breached. So we're going through with third parties and with every assessment we can get to make sure that any loopholes that could possibly be used against us are closed. So.
Now, I tie this back to number one, but that may not have been the person's intent. Anything to say besides no comment?
On which, I'm sorry?
Anything to say besides no comment?
As
I look at it, I'm tying it back to the when will we know more about the cybersecurity attack, but that may not be what the writer intended.
Okay, like I said, I can't give you a definitive date. Well, like I said, we're closing in on finishing up. I'm assuming 30 days. It could be another 60. That's kind of up to our third party, how fast they can process this. But everyone, including myself, the commissioners, we all want this to be as transparent as we can be. We just have to deal with the process, and this is a process. So we apologize. I know the public's not always been happy with what has come out or to the speed at which it's came out, but there are processes that we are required to follow, and we did so.
Question number 4 is, where are the commissioners? People from Indy are here, but they can't walk down. The invitation was issued, and you said the commissioners were otherwise
They
engaged?
were unaware that they were requested to be panelists for this, but they do apologize for their absence. They are committed in other meetings. Otherwise, they would have been here.
I can say their specific invitation it was the same as yours, which was we invite you to participate in the discussion.
Well, I will say I wasn't aware that I was participation and panelist is kind of two different things. I'm fine sitting here being a panelist. I didn't anticipate being a panelist, so.
Understood. Number 5, are the elections here safe after the shutdown that took place? Can we trust that our votes will count?
Yes. As I stated earlier, nothing to do with the clerk's office data, elections data, or voter registration operations data was accessed. The networks that the SVRS system used were not compromised. They used the SVRS that we are an internet connection to them. It does not pass through our servers. It goes straight to the state. So there is, from Monroe County's stand, there is no issues with security from this side of anything, and I don't believe we have any security issues with the clerk's side of things. So I'm completely confident in the security of our next election.
Can I emphasize that under Indiana law, no voting machine is connected to the internet. They're not accessible by the internet. They have layers of internal controls. If somebody would try to peel off a sticker, and even if they could connect a device, which they can't because they're special adapters, it would shut the machine off and set off an alarm, and actually they would be committing a crime. The machines only operate during the specific hours that elections go. There's quite a bit going on there. Voting machines and that whole system not connected to the internet. Same way with there's no real connection between the poll book either. So that's kind of been dealt with somewhere much before on in the system. So the question, is someone going to votes? Will someone's votes count because of some type of internet breach? That's not really an issue. The internet issue might be, malicious information, artificial intelligence, false information, social media, rumors about something. I guess maybe somebody rumored that a poll was closed, or the lines were so long, or tried to do that. But in terms of the technical aspect of it, that's not a vulnerability that people should be worried about. Thanks.
Well, and then also, Secretary of State's office with the SVRS system, you guys have a protocol in place. So whenever there's any possible win of a county, you guys deal with that.
Immediately.
Yeah, so they shut down the access immediately, and then as an added precaution, typically reset the password for all other counties. So, yeah, for the entire state, which is always is intense when you have a few happen within a week or two of each other. Yes, you do get some complaints, but it so there are even things while it's the state system that is being addressed as well. So there's things in place from that perspective, and Jerry is right when it comes to the actual voting machines; those are not connected. So if you hear Monroe County was under attack, it's not going to be on the actual machines that you're voting on. That's not even connecting. What you're concerned though is about processes, procedures, confidential information, questions that the public may be asking that would be confidential of their voting situation or whatnot. Those are the things, and then just to cause disruption. And then again, I think to Scott's earlier comment, undermining that confidence, right, of voters, right, which is the psychology that the bad actors are going for too. So those are things to also keep in mind as we're kind of recouping from the issue you guys had.
The last piece of this is a comment, and I don't know who did this, but I'm so very grateful for it. It's to Nicole Kiley in the voter registration office. Thank you so much for your hard work and dedication to Monroe County elections. We can trust you. that touches my heart inexplicably. I have tried to look for the small wins since the breach last month, and thank goodness it did not happen around the primary. We were already past the primary, and we are not yet to the general election, which is why I arranged for this, so that we could have these discussions, because it was important to me for all 93,000 Monroe County voters will get more because people like to vote for the President of the United States. It was important to me to have this conversation so that they know that we are working on this and we are committed to ensuring a free, fair, and unbreachable election to the extent that I can control it, and I can only control so much of it. Thank you. This next question is directed to me. Say an inspector at a polling site gets a call from you describing some emergency and tells them to do something that disrupts voting, but it's not you, and it's an AI simulation of your voice. What is being done to avoid problems like this? So for whomever I wrote this question, I just want to tell you up front, I'm an old woman. I am trying to wrap my head around AI and watching what is put out there about it. When I sit at the legislative level in the State House and they are trying to create legislation around AI, it feels to me like the horse was already out of the barn. So I don't know, other than to follow what the state guidelines are about AI, to do other than that. What I can say for my inspectors and my poll workers, I have the best poll worker trainers this side of heaven. I feel so very fortunate. Shout out to Miss Ashley if you're watching. So great. And I do try to stop by every polling class that I can to not only thank them, but to answer any questions or concerns like this in real time and assuage their fears about issues with elections. What I will say specifically about this is they are given my phone number. I would never tell you to do anything that would go against your training. And so if you would get something against that training, my cell phone works. I am sitting over in that corner with a laptop, reaching out to the media, reaching out to candidates and invested stakeholders about what's going on in real time. So if there is a problem, a bipartisan team is coming to you, and I am never going to tell you something that would go against the training that you receive in your inspector trainings. I hope that fairly answers the question that you asked me. If it did not, submit another question. I'll stay here for as long as there are questions. The last one is for Kylie and Nicole. And I think they mean have, but they said, will we have de-escalation training for poll workers? I think let's talk about a couple of things. First, we talked earlier, somebody brought up earlier about the police. I am very honored. I have the sheriff's cell phone number in my cell phone and the chief of Bloomington Police. So they have been kind to me in previous presidential elections and welcomed me to the table to let me know what they are doing. Someone has already astutely pointed out we cannot have police officers at the polling sites, but they can be near our polling sites. And so they have told me in the past that they have gone to each of our polling locations to look for abnormalities and suspicious activity. They are ready and waiting to take calls from our inspectors should there be a problem at the polling sites on Election Day. I certainly am not opposed to us looking at a de-escalation component for inspectors. I don't know that we could do it for everybody, but certainly for our inspectors who are the first point of contact if there is an issue at a polling site, and we expect them to contact law enforcement should there be anything untoward. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I'll touch base on that a little bit. So me and Dustin actually are part of a SEATS program. So that's it's put on by VSTOP, and it's election administration, technology, security. There's a lot to it, and it's amazing. And we get so many great information and also resources from other counties. So at the end of that course that we're taking, you do a what is it called? Capstone project. And so there is a county that I am actually in contact with right now that has set up all of this training on de-escalation and fires and tornadoes and just any type of incident that could possibly happen, and they're going to share that with us, and then me and Ashley are looking to incorporate that into the inspectors and judges training, since they do have the longer session of training. So inspectors and judges go through a 3-hour long training, and then our clerks and sheriffs go through a 1 hour.
Kylie, can I show off your lanyard card?
Yes, you can.
So we talked about blowing the whistle on election interference, and this is it's a lanyard with a whistle, and it's got some cards. I don't know if any of you have kids that play soccer, but we're making these available to clerks, and actually a lot more of them available to people who work at polls. So there's some basic information on these cards. So, one is this whistle costs about 40 cents, but anybody could blow the whistle and get some help. But these cards, green card, yellow card, red card, black card, the black card says call 911. And so this is a kind of I don't know, it's not very sophisticated, but we wanted to have this like a simple thing for people at the polls to remind themselves of what's okay, what's something that someone needs to be cautious about, what's something that might stop, you need to stop what's going on, and then when you might need to call the police. So that is kind of a way that we're trying to make it a better experience for voters and for people who are working at the polls. Thanks.
And some additional information with CISA, we have sheets on how to de-escalate. We actually have a YouTube video on that, which I've been like suggesting, hey, send that to all your poll workers. They all have access to YouTube. And if it's an older person, they know somebody who does, right? So again, there's going to be a lot of resources, because that is going to be our primary concern on election day, is the safety of the poll workers and also the voters. So I definitely would highly suggest. And then the other thing I've been suggesting too is, during early voting, where you have maybe some poll workers come in to help throughout that month, or during any like kind of dead periods or at the beginning, to go over again, just like a safety brief, just like, hey, if this is happening, call this person if that's the person you guys designate to be the most trained, or if you really feel uncomfortable in confrontations, then kind of making sure that the inspectors and stuff are aware of the people who really will not feel comfortable in that situation. So just those kind of like small things, but they go a long way in a bad situation.
Are there any other questions in the audience that I can have Kylie come and get? Okay, any questions of the panelists or for any other panelist?
Only one question.
One question.
What do we have to do, Secretary of State and as community ourselves, in order to increase the participation in the elections? Because as you indicated, the percentage of registered voters to the percentage of actual people that are coming out of vote.
It's something that I've studied for some years, and it's something that we're interested in. When you, if you Google or look, we used AI recently to ask the question, why don't people vote? People would commonly say, well, people don't vote because we have this photo ID requirement, or you have to register to vote. There's some perception that these administrative things you have to do to vote, you got to register to vote, and you got to go to the polls and have an ID, that's discouraging people from voting. But there are actually some very lengthy academic studies done by Washington think tanks and the RAND Corporation, all that. And it's really complicated why people don't participate in elections. It's actually similar to like why people don't go to church. Well, if your parents went to church and maybe took you to church when you're young, you'll probably keep going to church when you're older. If you didn't, then you're less likely. And if you have some connection with some candidate or some issue, you're likely to vote. So it is kind of a complicated thing. I think awareness of elections, candidates that are that people can relate to, have a lot to do with it. So candidates and political parties, I think, have a role to it. But we're studying it. We're doing a lot more outreach this year than other secretaries have done in the past, because we really just think that awareness. We've got regional outreach directors that are setting up voter registration tables and speaking to groups and going to schools, talking to people. Certainly, I think getting young people involved through their civic education classes seems to help too. But we're also open for ideas of what we can do. It is a challenge.
Challenge. We do quite a few things in Monroe County. It doesn't feel like it when you look at that number, the percentage of voter turnout. But we are very grateful to local partners like the League of Women Voters, the candidates themselves, the university, to get the word out about the opportunity to not only register, but vote. I have an early voting commercial that tends to run through the entirety of early voting. We have signs that you can check out here that says vote now. We just ordered a really big banner to put in front of what we call election operations, so that if you are driving by, you just need to show up with your driver's license at our early voting site. I have tried to implement other opportunities here in Monroe County. I've tried to do a satellite in different parts of Monroe County. That has not landed well in terms of support. If you have thoughts about that, that would be wonderful. But we really do make every effort, and as do the candidates themselves, to get the word out about when and how to vote. And so, as Mr. Bonnet said, if you have ideas, we certainly welcome them and appreciate them.
Actually, it came up, something related came up in a public meeting last night about interest in additional early voting access. So people have ideas, voters have ideas. I think a lot of our best solutions could come from people who want to participate or who have participated, who are eligible but haven't participated yet. So I am excited if we are all indeed on the same page that we want all eligible voters to be able to exercise their right to vote. I feel like we have fertile ground for ideas to make that happen together.
Another thing that came up last night during our Vote Center Committee meeting was for my capstone project, I'm working on student involvement and getting them registered to vote and getting that voter turnout for the students up here in Monroe County. And so one thing that we were talking about is I'm working with PACE right now to see if we can set up technically an event on National Voter Registration Day, which is September 17th, and going out to the campus and just having an event to get as many students registered to vote that are eligible to register. And also at the end of that day, we're looking at planning to have the Vote Center Committee meet there for a public discussion like we did in Ellettsville a couple of weeks ago. Just in general, to get as many people registered to vote and to help get that turnout in Monroe County up in general is one thing that is really important to us here in Monroe County.
Any other questions? Anything that's on your hearts to say about this amazing opportunity that we've had today? Well, then with that, I will express my sincere and heartfelt gratitude to each of our panelists for the sacrifices you made to be here today. I am incredibly grateful that you take my calls. You're packing up your kid and you took my call. It is important, and I wanted any person who came or watched to be able to reassure any voter in Monroe County that we are working very hard to bring you the election you deserve in Monroe County as we prepare for what literally could be a history-making election. And so I thank you. I hope that you won't delete my number from your cell phone in case we should want to have another conversation. And so with that, unless there's something that anybody wants to say in closing, I will just thank you all for coming. Thank you for participating, and just thank you in general. We will make this happen.